The bully had no idea the trash he mocked in front of her kids once led elite rescue missions in Afghanistan, until she made him regret every word. The morning sunlight filtered through the canopy of elm trees, casting long shadows across Millstone Park. Birds chirped overhead, and the laughter of children echoed near the jungle gym. Amid this calm scene, Jenna Carter, a woman with deep brown skin, calm hazel eyes, and a military-hardened composure, walked beside her two children, 8-year-old Malik and 5-year-old Zuri. Her high puff of coiled natural hair bounced with each step, her black combat boots silent but firm on the gravel path. She wore a fitted olive-green tactical jacket over a black V-neck t-shirt and dark distressed jeans that bore the wear of someone who didn't waste money on fashion but lived for function. It had been 2 years since Jenna left active duty. 8 deployments, countless field missions, and now soccer practices and snack schedules. She'd traded rifles for school lunchboxes, but nothing in her spirit had softened. She didn't need to talk about her service, her posture, her quiet alertness. The way she scanned every environment, it all spoke volumes. They were headed for the far end of the park where Zuri liked the swings, and Malik always raced the other kids. As Jenna approached the benches, she caught the eye of a man standing by the play structure. He was loud, unshaven, wearing a sleeveless t-shirt and cheap sunglasses, sipping from a styrofoam cup. His tone pierced the peaceful morning. "Figures," he said, eyeing her from head to toe. "Bringing that kind of trash around decent families. Don't you have somewhere else to be?" Jenna froze mid-step, her daughter's hand still in hers. Malik looked up, confused, sensing tension but not understanding it yet. The air around them changed, not visibly, but Jenna felt it. Her pulse didn't rise. Her breath didn't quicken. What kicked in was muscle memory, the same as when she'd been surrounded in enemy territory, radio silent, and still had to protect lives. "Excuse me?" Jenna asked, her tone controlled and flat. The man laughed and gestured to her outfit, then to her kids. "You people just show up anywhere thinking this is a free-fall. Look at you, look at them. No class, no standards." This park was clean until now. Jenna's jaw tensed. Her children heard everything. Zuri's lip began to tremble, and Malik's fists clenched, but he didn't know what to do. Neither did the other parents. They looked on, silent, afraid of confrontation, perhaps unsure of how far things would go. Jenna slowly knelt down beside Zuri and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Remember what Mommy told you? We never let weak people break us." She kissed her daughter's forehead, then stood back up. "You have no idea who you're talking to," she said, locking eyes with the man. He laughed again. "Oh yeah, what are you going to do, lady? Scream for help?" Jenna's expression didn't change. "No, but you might." What happened next wasn't flashy. No punches were thrown, no screaming match. What Jenna did was far more unnerving. She walked up within 3 feet of the man, and with military precision, took a defensive stance, feet shoulder-width apart, arms relaxed but ready. Her voice dropped low. "Do you know what happens when someone threatens a soldier's children?" she asked. The man hesitated. He hadn't expected this. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She was calm, too calm. And suddenly, he wasn't in control of the situation anymore. "I've defused bombs," she continued. "I've rescued hostages. I've carried wounded men through enemy fire. I promise you there is nothing, and I mean nothing, more dangerous than a mother trained for war." A nearby father stood up, slowly walking toward Jenna. Then another. One of the moms came over and knelt beside Zuri, offering her a juice box. The energy of the park shifted. People weren't afraid anymore. They were alert, watching, on Jenna's side. The bully swallowed. "I didn't mean anything serious, all right? Just making a joke." "You called me trash," Jenna said, unmoving, "in front of my children. That's not a joke. That's disrespect. And where I come from, you respect. The people who protect your freedom, even if they're no longer wearing a uniform." He looked around and realized he had no backup, no support, and no dignity left. Jenna slowly stepped back. "You should leave," she said, and he did. He turned and walked out of the park without another word. But Jenna wasn't finished. Not with the world. not with herself. The incident stirred something deeper, a realization that no matter how far she came from the battlefield, another one waited in civilian life, the battle for dignity, safety, and respect. And she wasn't going to fight it quietly anymore. That was the day everything changed. Because Jenna Carter, single mom, former elite soldier and quiet warrior, decided to show the world that strength doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears combat boots and carries a juice-stained backpack. The park incident hadn't left Jenna's mind, not because she was afraid, but because of what it represented. The look on Ziri's face when that man called her trash. The way Malik didn't know whether to run or fight. That moment burned into Jenna's memory more deeply than the firefights she had survived in Helmand. There was something more intimate, more violating about being disrespected in front of your own children. You could take bullets in war, but this was poison in daylight. That evening, Jenna sat at her kitchen table, flipping through a worn leather notebook she used during her deployments. She'd kept it through bombings, sandstorms, and unbearable heat. Its pages were full of military tactics, call signs, motivational quotes, and now she began to fill it with something new, a mission plan. Not to hurt anyone, but to change everything. This wasn't going to be just about one ignorant man in a park. It was about an entire system of silent hate, of subtle threats, of whispered judgment. She'd protected the country. Now, she was going to protect her children's future and build a community that refused to bow to bullies. The next morning, Jenna went into action. She pulled out her old laptop and began researching. Within hours, she tracked down the bully from the park. His name, Kyle Dandridge, a mid-level contractor who had several minor complaints filed against him for harassment, all of which had been brushed under the rug. He lived just a few blocks away. Jenna stared at his smug social media posts, one selfie at a men's leadership rally, another with the caption keeping it real, no snowflakes allowed. She closed the laptop. This man wasn't just a bad apple. He was a disease that infected wherever he was allowed to thrive. But instead of confronting him directly again, Jenna focused on building something stronger. She reached out to other mothers she'd met at the park, black, brown, white, Latina. They all had stories. One had been followed around a grocery store like a thief. Another had a neighbor call CPS on her because her son was too loud. It didn't take long for a small, powerful group to form, women who were tired of being treated like they didn't belong. They named themselves the Vanguard Circle. Jenna led their first meeting like she led her unit back in the Army. She set goals, assigned responsibilities, and developed a communications plan. But this wasn't a military op. It was a movement. Within days, the Vanguard Circle had a presence at every school board meeting, every city council session, and even began hosting self-defense workshops in the local YMCA taught by Jenna herself. One afternoon, after a workshop, a reporter from a local paper approached Jenna. Word had gotten out about the park incident. The reporter had heard whispers that the mother involved had once been special forces. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did you used to serve overseas?" Jenna didn't flinch. "I served my country for 12 years. And now I serve my kids, every kid who's ever been made to feel small." The article went viral, and the backlash came just as quickly. Kyle Dandridge saw the article and recognized Jenna in the photo. He posted a video online.
Calling
her militant, accusing her of turning peaceful communities into war zones. He tried to spin the story, painting himself as the victim, but it backfired. Parents from all over the county who had witnessed his behavior in the past began commenting, sharing stories, posting videos. One brave woman uploaded a phone recording from the park confrontation that day. Kyle's face. His words. Everything was there. He was exposed. Jenna didn't cheer. She didn't smirk. Instead, she sat with her kids and talked to them. Sometimes she said people don't get punished right away. Sometimes they keep getting away with it. But if you keep standing up, if you stay calm, and if you never let hate make you bitter, the truth comes out. Zuri climbed into her lap, nodding quietly. Malik looked up and asked, "Are we going back to the park tomorrow?" Jenna smiled. "We're not just going back, we're taking others with us." That weekend, the Vanguard Circle hosted a Unity in the Park event. Over 100 families came. Jenna gave a speech short, powerful, direct, I was called trash in this park, she said, voice amplified through a small mic. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for restoration. No one has the right to decide who belongs. We all do. When she stepped down, her boots landing firmly on the grass, the crowd erupted in applause. Not because she was famous, not because she'd gone viral, but because in that moment, every person watching knew this woman wasn't just a mother. She was a leader, a protector, and a force of nature. Kyle never showed up to the event. He was too busy trying to hide from the light. It had been 3 weeks since the Unity in the Park event, and something had shifted in the community. Jenna could feel it everywhere in the way strangers greeted her with a nod of respect, in the sudden increase in community volunteers, and even in the way the local media had begun covering school meetings and racial equity forums with a new seriousness. The seeds she planted were growing not because she sought fame, because the people were finally ready to follow someone who walked her truth with strength and grace. Still, Jenna never let her guard down. She knew from her military days that the most dangerous moments come not during conflict, but in the quiet after. That's when enemies regroup. That's when resentment festers. And she was right. On a cold Wednesday morning, Jenna received an anonymous envelope at her doorstep. Inside was a printout of her military discharge papers, including her deployment, locations, squad names, and last known commanding officer. Red pen had circled one line at the bottom: honorable discharge, psychological fatigue protocol initiated. There was no return address, no note. But the message was loud and clear. Someone wanted to question her stability. She held the paper for a long time, and then she smiled. They had no idea what kind of strength they had just provoked. Jenna called a meeting of the Vanguard Circle that evening. She laid the paper flat on the community center table, and everyone leaned in. Some gasped. Others grew angry. But Jenna raised her hand and calmed the room. They're scared, she said. Why, they're digging. They think if they find one flaw, one line in my record, they can erase everything we're building. But they don't understand the one thing that truly makes us dangerous. What's that? asked Marisol, a fellow mother and former police officer. Jenna smiled. We don't break, we rebuild. The room erupted in agreement. That week, Jenna decided to go even further. She began recording a video series titled The Mother's Stand, 8-minute clips where she discussed discipline, confidence, post-traumatic strength, and raising children with emotional armor. Each video started the same way. You don't need a weapon to fight. You need clarity, courage, and community. I've worn a uniform. But this is the most important mission I've ever served. By the end of the month, her videos had gained over 1.2 million views, and just like that, the threats returned. Kyle Dandridge wasn't silent anymore. He resurfaced online under a new blog, Take Back Our Streets. His posts were venomous, filled with coded language, fear-mongering, and references to Jenna as the angry veteran mom trying to militarize our parks. But what he didn't realize was that people were watching now. Closely, a young local teacher named Tanya had been following Kyle's posts and tipped off. Tanya discovered that Kyle was not only violating several community guidelines, but that he was also listed as a volunteer supervisor for a local after-school program. Jenna's stomach turned. This man is around children, she said, her voice low. She didn't hesitate. Using her connections, Jenna cross-referenced his online activity with public records and filed a formal complaint. The Vanguard Circle launched a digital petition. Within 48 hours, it gained 12,000 signatures. Local news outlets picked up the story again, this time calling out not just his harassment, but the failure of oversight that allowed him near children. Kyle was quietly removed from his role, but Jenna knew it wasn't enough. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was strategizing. She partnered with local veterans, educators, and civil rights lawyers to propose a new initiative, the Community Respect Act legislation that required background checks and bias training for all individuals working in youth programs. Even as volunteers, the same city council that once overlooked racial incidents was now flooded with calls. emails, and attendees at every meeting. People were demanding action, not just justice. Change at the next council meeting. Jenna spoke with Malik and Zuri standing beside her. I'm a mother, I'm a soldier. I'm a black woman who served a country that doesn't always serve us back. But I still believe in it. Because my children deserve a future that doesn't require them to armor up just to play at the park. Thunderous applause followed. The Respect Act passed with unanimous support 2 weeks later. And yet, behind all the victories, Jenna remained on edge. Not paranoid, just precise. She began to notice a white sedan parked on her street at odd hours. Her mailbox was opened on 3 different mornings. And once, she found boot prints outside her back fence. So she did what she had always done in war zones. She adapted. She installed cameras, tapped at her home security system, alerted a few trusted veterans from her former unit who lived nearby. She even began teaching Malik some basic awareness techniques, not to make him fearful, but to make him powerful. You don't have to be afraid of the dark, she told him one night. Just learn to see better in it. But darkness wasn't the only thing closing in. One evening, Jenna received a call from a blocked number. When she picked up, a man's voice said, "You don't stop, and your past will be public record." She didn't respond. She simply ended the call, but it made her think about the time she lost her brothers in arms in Kandahar, about the mistakes she made, about the night she had to make a call that cost lives to save others, the fatigue, the sleepless nights, the flashbacks. They wanted to use her scars against her, but they didn't understand her scars were her strength. That night, she sat in front of the camera and recorded her most powerful message yet. No makeup, no lighting crew, just Jenna raw and real. I was diagnosed with PTSD after my last deployment. I still live with it. I'm not broken. I'm healing. And no one gets to weaponize my truth. She paused, letting the words breathe. Want to shame me for surviving war? For coming home and raising 2 kids alone? For building something bigger than myself? Then do it. Say my name. Write your posts. She posted the video with the title, "Truth Is My Armor?" It gained 2.7 million views in 3 days. But even as her message reached the world, Jenna knew the fight was far from over. The war had just changed uniforms. Jenna Carter didn't flinch when the threats came. She mobilized. The morning after, her viral "Truth Is My Armor" video went live. Jenna stood in her kitchen, pouring cereal into Malik and Zuri's bowls while her phone buzzed nonstop. Thousands of comments, dozens of interview requests, messages from strangers, veterans, single mothers, abuse survivors, people across the country who now saw Jenna as a symbol of resilience. Not just because of her military past, but because she had turned every scar, every injustice, into a shield that protected others. But for Jenna, the spotlight was just a tool. Her real battlefield was still her community. While the threats had escalated, so had the Vanguard Circle's influence. With their growing network, they expanded beyond park safety and volunteer reform. Now, they were tackling systemic bias in school suspensions, advocating for mental health services for single parents, and partnering with local therapists too. Offer free trauma counseling for veterans and survivors alike. The woman who had once been called trash in a public park was now spearheading a countywide resilience network. But the enemy wasn't done. On a rainy Thursday morning, as Jenna dropped Zori off at preschool, she noticed two men standing across the street, dressed in plain clothes but too rigid in posture, watching, communicating silently. She didn't panic. She logged their facial features, posture, clothing, and direction of approach, her brain calculating possibilities, like it once did during recon patrols in foreign lands. Later that afternoon, her doorbell rang. It was a Child Protective Services agent. There had been a complaint filed, anonymously concerns about Jenna Carter's emotional stability and parenting practices. The accusation claimed her combat experience made her unsafe for children, alleging military aggression in volatile episodes. The CPS agent was polite but firm. Were required to investigate. We understand these claims might be retaliatory, but protocol must be followed. Jenna didn't argue. She nodded. Let them in. Over the next 2 hours, Jenna calmly guided the agent through her house. Organized, safe, nurturing, photos of her children, letters from her former commanding officer, diplomas, counseling records, proving she had voluntarily sought support after discharge, testimonies from community leaders. Her children were clean, happy, and articulate. Malik even showed the agent his self-defense books, explaining how his mom taught him awareness, not violence. When the visit ended, the agent paused. At the door, I've done a lot of these, she said. This is the first time I've seen a household run like a command post and feel like a sanctuary. Jenna smiled faintly. That's how I survive. The CPS case was dropped within 48 hours, but it lit a fire in Jenna. They were now trying to weaponize the very thing she was most proud of, her motherhood, and that made her dangerous. She knew now Kyle Dandridge wasn't acting alone. His blog wasn't just personal bile. It was part of a larger network of online hate, quietly coordinated, using dog whistles and technical loopholes to target women like her, black women, single mothers, veterans, voices of change. So she reached out to an old friend, Tasha Bell, a cybersecurity expert she'd served with in Ramadi. Tasha, now running a private tech firm, didn't hesitate. I've been following your rise, girl, she said over the phone. Time to go from defense to offense. With Tasha's help, they began quietly tracing IP addresses, archiving posts, and building digital heat maps of harassment sources. They discovered coordinated messaging patterns from fake accounts. Many linked to a single online forum called True Fathers of America, where Jenna's name had become a lightning rod. Her face was on their meme boards. Her quotes were twisted into parody. One thread was titled, "How to Take Down the Warrior Mom." What they hadn't counted on was that the warrior had backup. Tasha helped Jenna compile everything into a digital report. She also looped in a law professor who specialized in online defamation and cyberstalking. Together, they prepared a public case and sent formal cease letters to the forum administrators. But Jenna didn't stop there. She released another video, this time titled, "When the War Comes Home." In it, she showed screenshots of the hate. She read their words aloud. She exposed the usernames, the tactics, the dehumanization. Then she looked into the camera. You think I'm just a mom with a past? You think you can smear me with lies? But I've survived bombings, ambushes, and betrayal. And I'm still here. You're not fighting one woman. You're fighting all the women who refuse to be silenced again. The internet erupted. National media picked it up. Celebrities retweeted her. Former soldiers posted in support. A movement bloomed under the hashtag Stand With Jenna, but Jenna wasn't interested in viral fame. She wanted real protections, so she pushed local lawmakers again, this time for an ordinance requiring transparency for community forums and mandatory reporting of targeted harassment patterns. Her efforts were met with resistance, but she kept showing up. With spreadsheets, with screenshots, with victims, and finally they listened. The ordinance passed. The forum that had mocked her was taken offline. Investigations began. Kyle Dandridge, who tried to distance himself, deleted his posts, disappeared from the public eye, but it was too late. One of his former co-workers leaked a group chat where Kyle bragged about filing the false CPS complaint. It was over. He was fired. His name blacklisted in every local community network. Still, Jenna refused to gloat. She was too busy building. She turned part of the vanguard. Circles funds toward creating a permanent resource center, the Carter Initiative, named not after herself, but her children. It offered therapy, parenting classes, legal aid, and a 24/7 helpline for harassment victims. She also trained new leaders to expand the work. She knew change didn't depend on her alone. It had to outlive her presence. At home, Malik had started writing poetry. Zuri was learning jiu-jitsu. Jenna. She finally allowed herself a moment on her back porch, eyes closed, boots resting. On the step, the war hadn't ended, but for the first time in years, she had won a battle that mattered more than medals ever could. The soft creak of the front door pulled Maya back from her thoughts. Her children, Ava and Malik, rushed in laughing, their backpacks swinging, their shoes stomping over the tiled floor with wild energy. She was grateful for their joy. It was the one constant in a world where people still judged her by appearances. It had been 3 days since the grocery store incident. 3 long, restless nights of playing the words in her head like an old, broken tape. Trash like you shouldn't even be raising kids. That man, Paul Kingsley, had publicly humiliated her. And though she didn't retaliate with violence, his smirk still lingered in her mind. What he didn't realize was that she wasn't afraid of him or any other bully. What angered her more was the effect his words had on her children. She'd fought wars for her country, but the war for her dignity was being fought on the streets of her hometown. But Paul hadn't finished. Neither had she. The following morning, Maya dropped her kids at school early. She was wearing a slim-fit olive green jacket over a black tactical tee, dark cargo pants, and polished brown boots. It wasn't just a fashion choice. It was muscle memory. She was headed to a meeting, not with lawyers, not with teachers, but with herself. It was time to decide whether she was going to keep enduring quietly or start shaking the ground her. First stop was the local VA center. Maya had connections, and she wasn't afraid to call them. The woman who greeted her at the front desk, Sergeant Clara Jansen, broke into a grin the moment she saw her. "Maya Green," Clara said, stepping around the desk for a hug. "You're still the only woman I know who once took out 2 insurgents." With a single magazine clip, Maya smirked. Some habits die hard. She leaned in closer. "Clara, I need a favor. Not a military one, but a tactical one. I need surveillance. I need to know who this man is, the one who humiliated me and made my daughter cry. I want to know what skeletons he's hiding in that smug little life of his." Clara raised an eyebrow but didn't hesitate. "I'll make some calls. I've got friends in local law enforcement." He picked the wrong soldier to provoke. Die. Noon Maya had a manila folder in her hand, thick with information about Paul Kingsley, where he worked. His criminal record, yes, he had 1 domestic disturbance. 2 counts, his tax evasion issue from 3 years ago, and a handful of aggressive complaints filed by local employees. Maya didn't want revenge. She wanted exposure. That afternoon, she met with a local journalist named Ramon Diaz. Ramon had once covered her return from deployment for the local paper. He remembered her well. "I heard what happened," he said after she finished telling him the story. "And I can't believe no one's calling it out. You've always been an American hero, but I think it's time people saw the heroics you're doing now, too. Ramon, I don't want to be praised. I want to show that this happens every day to women like me. Single moms, women of color, veterans. We are treated like we're nothing until we snap. But I'm not snapping. I'm standing. Slowly, I'll run the story front page. But I want pictures. The real you, the soldier, the mother, the warrior." She agreed. Meanwhile, Ava had become quiet again at school. Teacher Miss Morales noticed she's bright, sharp, but guarded. Ever since that day at the store, she's not herself. She said gently to Maya during pickup. That night, Maya sat down with her children in the living room, soft fire crackling in the fireplace. "Do you two know why that man said what he said to us?" she asked, kneeling in front of them. Malik's voice was timid. "Because we look different?" Maya held his hand. "That's part of it. But it's also because some people feel powerful only when they hurt others. They look at kindness or strength, and they get scared, so they attack. Ava's eyes filled with tears. You didn't even do anything? I didn't then. I'm doing something now. The next day, the local paper printed a bold front-page headline, "Veteran Mom, Harassed in Grocery Store." Now she's fighting back. The photo beneath it showed Maya in her military fatigues, standing tall, with Ava and Malik beside her, both wearing shirts that read, "Strength is silent until it speaks." The community response was immediate. Dozens of mothers from around the neighborhood, white, black, Latino, Asian, came forward with their own stories. Maya's inbox flooded with messages of support. Some shared videos of similar incidents. Some just wanted to say thank you, but the most unexpected reaction came from Paul Kingsley himself. Maya was picking up coffee when a man approached her from behind. She recognized the voice before she turned. Was all this really necessary? She turned slowly, facing him. Called me trash in front of my children, she said. This is the least I could do. Paul's eyes darted around nervously. My job's on the line. They're investigating those complaints now. My wife moved out. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't smile. Instead, she said something that shocked him. I didn't do this to punish you. I did it to protect others. You just showed the world exactly who you are. I simply held up a mirror. She walked away. By the end of the week, the school invited Maya to speak at their upcoming Mater, Veterans Day Assembly. She stood on the stage, her kids in the front row, the entire auditorium packed. I fought for this country, she told them. But now I fight for respect, for justice, for my kids to walk into any room and know they are worthy, not because of their background, but because they're human. No one, and I mean no one, gets to take that away. The applause was thunderous. Ava stood and clapped first. Maya knew this wasn't the end. The world was still full of men like Paul, but the difference now was she wasn't afraid to fight them with truth, with courage, and with the power that came from being a mother, a soldier, and a woman who refused to be broken. Monica stood at the edge of the town hall steps, her spine straight as a ruler, flanked by cameras, microphones, and a tide of murmuring reporters. Her olive-toned skin glistened slightly under the sharp summer sun, but her expression was steel. Her two children, Eli and Zara, stood behind her, nervous yet visibly proud. They had witnessed the storm she walked through, and now they were about to see her rise above it all. It had been less than 48 hours since that viral video dropped, the one showing her confronting Blake Turner after his public insult. In the clip, she remained calm, powerful, and unshaken. Even as he called her a government handout junkie and worthless trash in front of her kids at the supermarket. His words had cut through the store like a blade, but Monica's response, a calm, assertive takedown delivered with poise and a chilling reminder of her military background, had captivated millions. Now, the country wanted to hear more. But Monica wasn't there for fame. She was there for a purpose. Her voice rang out, crisp and commanding. I serve this country, not just overseas, but here, every single day, as a mother raising children with dignity. You don't get to disrespect that. As the crowd erupted into applause, Monica's eyes scanned the back where Blake Turner stood alone, no longer smirking. His job at the construction firm? Suspended. His endorsement deals? Pulled. His community support? Evaporated. But Monica didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She didn't seek revenge. She was building something better. Behind the scenes, she'd launched a grassroots initiative, Project Valor, designed to support single mothers, especially veterans, with housing assistance, resumed training, PTSD counseling, and legal advocacy. Her inbox had exploded with volunteers, sponsors, and more importantly, stories from other women who'd been silenced, belittled, and underestimated. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about all of them. Later that evening, in her modest kitchen, where the hum of the refrigerator competed with the sizzling of vegetables on the stove, Monica sat with Zara, helping her study for her science test, her camouflage jacket now. Rested on the back of the chair, replaced by a soft hoodie with the words "Strength looks like this," embroidered in silver. The battle had shifted from war zones to classrooms and courtrooms, but Monica remained armed this time with purpose and resolve. Meanwhile, her phone lit up with a text from her commanding officer, now retired. "Proud of you, Sarge. You never needed a rifle to fight for justice. The world's finally catching up to who you've always been." Monica smiled, setting the phone aside. Across the table, Eli was sketching something quietly. She leaned over. "Who's that?" she asked. He flipped the sketch around. It was her, standing tall in a superhero cape, the American flag behind her. "You," he said simply. "The strongest person I know." She choked up but didn't let the tears fall. Warriors cry when the fight is worth it. The world had tried to break her. Society had labeled her. A bully had mocked her. But the battlefield had trained her to rise every time. And now she was leading the charge. The courtroom was electric. Cameras flashed. Whispers buzzed through the audience like static. The media had descended on the small California town like flies to honey, drawn by the story of a single mom turned hometown hero. But while the headlines painted Jade Matthews as a war-hardened vigilante, the reality was far more complex and far more dangerous. Jade stood behind the podium in the modest courtroom. Dressed in a fitted navy blue blazer and black slacks, her long jet-black hair tied into a low, clean ponytail. Her posture was straight, her gaze unwavering. Her kids sat in the front row, watching their mother not just with awe, but with a budding awareness that they were watching history in the making. Opposite her stood Connor Slate, bruised ego hidden behind a team of slick lawyers. He looked far less smug now than he did that day at the playground, where he dared to call her trash in front of her kids. The trial was no longer just about his verbal assault. It had spiraled into something deeper. Civil liberties, personal defense, the right to protect one's family, everything was on the table now. Jade's lawyer, an old Army friend named Lieutenant Maxina, Max Briggs, was brilliant, fierce, and tactical in both warfare and law. Her arguments weren't just based on facts. They were battles, orchestrated and precise. Max painted the entire courtroom in the truth of who Jade was: a decorated war hero, a single mother, a woman who had endured unimaginable pain but never let it define her. The witnesses rolled in, mothers who'd seen the incident, veterans who vouched for Jade's calm under pressure, even former commanders who testified to her valor. Each voice was another layer of armor wrapped around her. Name. Connor's team tried to twist the narrative, portraying her as volatile, unstable, using her military background as a weapon. But Jade never flinched. In the evenings back at home, Jade would hold her kids close. She made no effort to shield them from the truth anymore. They deserved to understand the world, to know why their mother fought not just on distant battlefields, but here, at home, where the war wore civilian clothes and whispered insults meant to wound. Then came the day everything changed. On the 7th day of the trial, new footage surfaced. A teenager who had been at the park that day had finally come forward. His video, grainy but clear, showed the exact moment Connor got in Jade's face. It showed her children crying, her composure, his shove. It proved that she had only defended herself and her children, and that the man everyone assumed was a harmless bully had crossed more than one line. The court erupted. The judge called an immediate recess, requesting the clip be formally submitted into evidence. Connor's lead attorney tried to discredit the teen, calling him unreliable, but Jade, calm and steady, asked to take the stand herself. The room went silent as she walked forward. She began not with rage, but with a story. Of Afghanistan, of losing her squad mate, Sergeant Lena Monroe, to an ambush they weren't supposed to walk into. Of how Jade had to carry her back under fire, whispering lullabies to a dying friend just to keep her awake. Of how, through all of it, she'd kept her cool, because a soldier couldn't afford to panic, and how when Connor Slate got in her face, shouted insults at her and her children, poked at their very humanity, she'd used the same control she learned on the battlefield to protect her babies. "I didn't fight wars to come home and let men like that defeat me in front. of my children," she said quietly, her voice breaking for the first time. The courtroom was dead silent. Not even a pen scratched paper. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Connor. "Do you wish to proceed with your countersuit?" he asked. Connor stood. Slowly, his lips quivered. Then finally he sat down. "No, Your Honor." The case was dismissed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. But Jade didn't address the press. She simply knelt down, wrapped her arms around her children, and whispered, "We did it." What she didn't know was that this moment, this quiet hug in front of hundreds, was being broadcast across the nation. Offers would start pouring in within hours. Book deals, documentaries, even an invitation from the Pentagon to help lead a new program for veterans transitioning into civilian life. But Jade Matthews wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about the way her daughter had stood, tall beside her, how her son had smiled through tears, and how, for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally home. It had been exactly 12 days since the incident outside Ridgewood Elementary. 12 days since that? Man, Derek Malloy had called Ciara trash in front of her children. 12 days since she had instinctively defended herself not with brute force, but with a precision only years of elite military training could provide. And now, it was all culminating in this courtroom, a room packed with tension, cameras, murmurs, and the uncomfortable silence of reckoning. Ciara sat at the front bench, wearing a simple black suit. Her hair was pulled back into a braided bun, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. She wasn't just here to defend herself anymore. She was here to protect every single mother who'd ever been humiliated, to stand for dignity, strength, and truth. The footage was presented by her lawyer, a sharp-witted veteran named Nina Patel, who had known Ciara from her time in uniform. She spoke with a confidence that cut through the courtroom haze like a blade. The screen lit up, and the moment replayed. Derek approaching, voice rising, calling Ciara trash, mocking her kids' clothes. Then Ciara stepping forward, not angrily, but with calm. His hand reached toward one of the kids in a threatening gesture, and in the blink of an eye, Ciara had disarmed him, pushed him back just enough to de-escalate the situation without throwing a punch. It was pure control. Measured, tactical, professional. Gasps filled the room. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is this the assault Mr. Malloy described?" Nina shook her head. "Your Honor, what you see here is not assault. It is a defensive maneuver. Any trained military professional would recognize as a non-lethal, non-aggressive response to a perceived threat. My client acted to protect her children. This wasn't violence. It was restraint." Derek squirmed in his seat, his lawyer pale-faced, and panicking, whispered frantically. The entire story Derek had spun, that Ciara attacked him unprovoked, that she was unhinged, was unraveling before everyone's eyes. Outside the courtroom, media vans waited. Journalists tweeted live updates. Hashtags like #MomVs, bully, and #MilitaryMomHero trended nationwide. In Ciara's neighborhood, neighbors began putting yellow ribbons on their doors, a symbol of support for veterans. Kids made signs that read, "Ciara is our hero." Even the school district that once sat silent began to reconsider its policies. But Ciara wasn't looking for glory. All she wanted was pizzand a future where her children would never again be ashamed of their past or afraid of their future. The judge cleared his throat. "Given the new evidence, the charges against Ms. Williams are hereby dismissed. Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation into the actions of Mr. Malloy, including his behavior toward minors and his prior record." As the gavel fell, tears welled in Ciara's eyes, not of sadness but release. Her kids ran to her, wrapping their arms around her waist. The courtroom clapped softly, then louder, until it became a standing ovation, and as she exited the building, hand in hand with her children pressed shouting her name, strangers cheering from the steps. Ciara didn't see herself as a victim or a celebrity. She was what she had always been, a mother, a soldier, and now a symbol of unshakable strength. The months following the courtroom victory had brought calm to Ciara's life, but tranquility was never permanent. New challenges loomed on the horizon, ones more subtle, yet equally threatening. It began with whispers of a new development project near their neighborhood, a sprawling commercial complex that threatened to displace several families, including hers. The proposal came without warning. City officials touted it as progress, an economic opportunity, but to Ciara and her neighbors, it felt like another battlefront. Families who had weathered discrimination and hardship were now being pushed out by rising rents and corporate interests. Ciara felt the familiar stir of resolve. She was no stranger to fights that mattered. This time, it wasn't a bully on the street, but systemic injustice masked as urban development. She rallied the vanguard circle, now a thriving community coalition. Together, they launched petitions, organized town hall meetings, and met with city council members. Ciara used her public profile to draw media attention, highlighting the stories of displaced families and the cultural loss they faced. Her kids, Eli and Zara, became her partners in activism. Eli started a community newsletter. Zara helped organize rallies and fundraisers. Their youthful energy inspired the whole neighborhood. One evening, standing in the crowded town hall, Ciara spoke passionately. "We fought to be seen. We fought to be heard. Now, we fight to stay. Because a home is not just a building. It's history, community, and love. We will not be erased." The battle was long and arduous, with setbacks and victories alike. But Ciara's leadership and the community's unity eventually led to a compromise. The development plan was revised to include affordable housing, green spaces, and protections for longtime residents. More than that, Ciara's work sparked a citywide movement for equitable urban planning. She looked at her children, proud, hopeful. Fierson knew this was the legacy worth fighting for. The victory over the development project had been a hard-fought one, but it came at a cost. Ciara's family had become a symbol in the city, a beacon for justice, yes, but also a target. Anonymous threats began arriving at her door. Vandalism appeared on her kids' school lockers. Social media attacks escalated into doxing attempts. The shadows of intimidation were darkening her doorstep, but Ciara was no stranger to shadows. She called on her old network, veterans, legal advocates, community organizers to build a protective shield around her family. They installed security cameras, coordinated neighborhood watch shifts, and reached out to local authorities. Yet Ciara knew that true safety came not from walls or locks, but from empowerment. She began teaching her children situational awareness and self-defense, blending lessons from her military training with lessons about courage, compassion, and resilience. One afternoon, while practicing moves in their small living room, Eli asked, "Mom, why do people try to hurt us?" Ciara looked at him, heart aching yet fierce. "Because they're afraid of what they don't understand. But fear is nothing compared to the strength we carry." Her children grew stronger every day, just as she did. Meanwhile, Ciara's public platform continued to grow. She launched a nonprofit dedicated to helping families facing harassment and intimidation, especially those who were single parents or veterans. She spoke at schools, city halls, and national conferences, always emphasizing the power of community and courage. And then, the unthinkable happened. A wildfire swept through the outskirts of the city, forcing evacuations and threatening homes, including hers. As smoke filled the air, Ciara led her neighbors in organizing safe evacuations, coordinating shelters, and providing aid to those displaced. The crisis revealed the true strength of the community she helped build, resilient, united, and ready to face whatever came next. When the skies cleared and the fires died down, Ciara stood amidst the ash and rubble, holding her children close. She whispered to herself, "We survive. We rise. Together." The days after the wildfire were heavy with loss and hope. Streets, once lined with familiar homes, were now scorched earth and charred memories. Yet, amidst the smoke and ruin, Ciara stood tall, a pillar for her family and neighbors alike. The evacuation centers overflowed with displaced families. Ciara organized donation drives, food distribution, and counseling sessions. Her nonprofit, which once operated from a small office, became the heart of recovery efforts. Volunteers poured in, many inspired by Ciara's story and resilience. But rebuilding wasn't just about structures. It was about restoring community, spirit, and trust. One evening, while walking through a temporary shelter, Ciara saw a young mother cradling her baby, eyes red from tears. She knelt beside her. "We'll get through this," Ciara said softly. "You're not alone." As days turned to weeks, rebuilding plans began. The city committed funds for affordable housing, green spaces, community centers, designed with input from those who lived through the fire. Ciara worked tirelessly, her voice carrying the weight of experience and hope. At home, her children adapted. Eli, now a teen, started a podcast, sharing stories of recovery and resilience. Zara organized youth groups focused on environmental education and advocacy. Ciara realized that her fight had grown beyond personal battles. It was a movement. One sunny afternoon, standing at a new community garden planted on a once-burned lot, Ciara addressed a crowd of neighbors, friends, and local officials. "This garden is more than plants and soil," she said. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together. No fire, no bully, no injustice can break us because we rise, we grow, we thrive." The crowd erupted in applause, and in that moment, Ciara knew her legacy wasn't just survival, it was transformation. Months after the wildfire, life began to settle into a fragile new normal. Ciara's community was rebuilding, the new homes rising from ashes, gardens blooming where destruction once reigned. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. The city's mayor announced a controversial policy aimed at tightening welfare eligibility, citing budget concerns. The policy disproportionately impacted single mothers, veterans, and low-income families, the very people Ciara and her nonprofit served. News of the policy ignited outrage. Families feared losing access to food assistance, housing subsidies, and health care. The community turned to Ciara, whose voice had become synonymous with strength and advocacy. Determined to fight back, Ciara organized town hall meetings, rallied affected families, and partnered with legal experts to challenge the policy. She faced politicians, lobbyists, and bureaucrats who dismissed her as just a mom or overly emotional. But she refused to back down. In a packed city council meeting, Ciara stood before lawmakers. Her voice steady, eyes fierce. She recounted stories of families at risk, veterans struggling with PTSD, mothers working multiple jobs, children who relied on those very programs to survive. "You may see numbers on a page," she said, "but we see faces, we see lives, and we demand to be heard." Her speech was met with applause from community members, but cold stares from some officials. Yet change was on her side. Public pressure mounted, media coverage intensified, and allies in the council emerged. After weeks of hearings and negotiations, the policy was revised to include protections for vulnerable families. Ciara's victory wasn't just policy, it was hope. At home, her children watched their mothers fight with admiration and a new understanding of leadership. Zara, inspired, began volunteering with the nonprofit. While Eli used his podcast to highlight advocacy efforts, one evening, as the family sat around their kitchen table, Ciara looked at her children and smiled. "This is what we fight for," she said softly. "It's not just for ourselves, but for every family who deserves a chance." And in that moment, the future felt a little brighter. The community hailed Ciara as a champion. Invitations poured in, speaking engagements, panels, and even a feature in a national magazine highlighting her journey from military service to community activism. She was a voice for the voiceless, a living example of resilience and empowerment. But as the spotlight grew brighter, so did the threats lurking in the dark. It began with anonymous emails, thinly veiled warnings, questions about her true intentions, and sinister hints at her past deployments. Then, her nonprofit's bank accounts were temporarily frozen due to suspicious activity flagged by unknown sources. The city's zoning board suddenly delayed approval for her planned Community Center.cia sensed a coordinated attempt to undermine. Her instincts, honed from years in hostile territories, kicked in. She reached out to allies in cybersecurity, law enforcement, and the veteran community. With their help, she uncovered a campaign of harassment spearheaded by a covert group opposed to her influence. A coalition of corporate interests and local figures threatened by her growing power. They spread rumors, leaked false information, and tried to isolate her from supporters. But Ciara refused to retreat. Instead, schooled the group publicly, sharing evidence of their tactics and rallying her community to stand firm. In a powerful open letter, she wrote, "When they attack, they reveal their fear. Our strength is in our truth, our unity, and our relentless pursuit of justice. We will not be silenced." The response was overwhelming. Donations to her nonprofit surged. More volunteers joined. Local officials who had wavered publicly pledged their support at home. Her children witnessed their mother's unwavering courage firsthand, a lesson that power often came wrapped in adversity. One night, Ciara sat at her kitchen table, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders, but her spirit unbroken. She whispered to herself, "This is just another mission. I'm ready." Ciara woke early to the soft glow of dawn filtering through the curtains. Outside, the city was stirring, unaware of the battle that awaited her. The attacks had intensified. Anonymous calls late at night, false complaints filed against her nonprofit, even sabotage attempts at the new community center's construction site. Yet, within the chaos, a deep calm rooted itself inside her. She had learned long ago that strength wasn't just about muscle or training, it was about heart at the community center. She met with her team. Volunteers were setting up for a healing workshop designed to help victims of harassment and violence. The room buzzed with quiet energy. Artists, counselors, mothers, veterans, all bound by the shared goal of rebuilding not just structures, but lives. Ciara took a deep breath and spoke. "This center is more than a building. It's a sanctuary, a place where wounds heal, where voices rise, and where power grows." Her words resonated. But the fight was far from over. One afternoon, a threatening letter arrived, no signature, just a chilling message warning her to back down. Instead of fear, Ciara felt resolve. She organized a community safety patrol and held an open forum to discuss collective security. Her leadership inspired trust. Neighbors who had once been strangers now stood side by side. Meanwhile, her children flourished. Zara, now a confident young woman, led youth empowerment groups, while Eli used his podcast platform to spotlight social justice stories. Together, they embodied the future Ciara had fought for, a future where courage and compassion were stronger than hate. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Ciara looked at her kids and smiled. "No matter what comes," she said, "we stand together. Because together, we are unstoppable." And with that, the shadows began to recede, light breaking through in the form of hope, unity, and unbreakable spirit. The sun dipped low over the city skyline, casting a warm amber glow that softened the edges of a world that had once seemed so harsh. Ciara stood on the porch of her rebuilt home, the gentle hum of laughter and conversation drifting from the garden where her children and neighbors gathered. Years the struggle had shaped her into something unrecognizable from the woman who'd first been called trash in front of her kids. Now, she was a leader, a mother, a warrior whose battles had forged not just survival, but transformation. Her nonprofit thrived, its programs reaching farther than she'd ever imagined. The community center was a hub of hope-offering education, healing, an opportunity to those who needed it most. Eli's podcast had become a national platform for stories of resilience. Zara's youth initiatives inspired a new generation to stand tall and speak out. One evening, Ciara gathered her family around the dinner table. The air was filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals and the warmth of shared stories. She looked into her children's eyes and said, "You have given me strength when I felt weak. You have been my purpose through every challenge." Her voice softened. This journey wasn't easy. but it was worth it, because it showed us what we're capable of when we refuse to be defined by others. As stars twinkled above, Skira felt a deep peace settle within Harea, promised that the battles of the past had paved the way for a brighter, stronger future. She whispered a quiet vow to keep fighting, keep loving, and keep leading, so that no one would ever have to face the darkness alone. As night settled around them, Skiara stood with her family in a small circle of light, a light that not only illuminated their home, but also the hearts of all who had ever fought for their identity and dignity. In her eyes was the glow of all the pain she had endured, yet on her face, the calm and courage that had carried her through. She looked at her children, now champions of the dream she once held, ready to face any challenge ahead. "This story doesn't end here," she said softly. "It's only the beginning, a beginning that shows everyone that the path of truth and courage never truly ends. Together, we will become the light that banishes darkness." With that spirit, Ciara took her first steps toward a new chapter in life, one where her story became a message of hope and strength for all.